What's up, YouTube? My name is Arthur Robinson Jr. I am the creator and host of PowerfulInterviews.com. I am a partner of NationalDiversified.com. I want to welcome each and every one of you to this fascinating video. In this interview, you're going to experience life-changing information that you will not find anywhere else. I have secured an incredible interview with a great friend of mine, a successful businessman, the former DEA agent. His name is Steve Murphy. Steve Murphy, along with his partner, Javier Pena, their organization was responsible for taking down the notorious drug trafficker in the world back in the 1980s and in the 1990s. His name is Pablo Escobar. In this interview, you're going to hear exclusively how Steve Murphy and his friend, partner, Javier Pena, they basically break down layman's terms how they took down Pablo Escobar and his organization. Also in this interview, Steve Murphy, he breaks down layman's terms about Pablo Escobar was responsible for smuggling 15 tons of cocaine a day. That's around 30,000 pounds a day. Also in this interview, Steve Murphy, he breaks down layman's terms about Pablo Escobar and his organization, the drug cartel. They were generating $420 million a week. Also in this interview, Steve Murphy, he breaks down layman's terms about Pablo Escobar was generating $21.9 billion a year in personal income. Also in this interview, Steve Murphy, he breaks down layman's terms about Pablo Escobar and his organization. They basically was responsible for killing a lot of people in Colombia, and they generated a lot of bloodshed and much, much more. So remember, this is not BS information. The right information will change your current situation. Wealthy people, they take advice from other wealthy people, and unfortunately, broke people, they take advice from broke people. So right about now, go get your pen and your pad, sit back and relax, and write down some notes. In this interview that I'm going to reveal to each and every one of you with my great friend, a successful businessman, the former DEA agent. His name is Steve Murphy. And Steve Murphy breaks down layman's terms about the true story of the biggest drug trafficker in Colombia. His name is Pablo Escobar. This interview, it will change your life. And don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel and turn your notifications on. That way you be well informed when I publish more successful audio interviews. So check it out.
Without further ado, I'd like to welcome the one, the only, the powerful Steve Murphy to the show.
Good morning, Arthur, and thank you very much for having me on this morning.
Well, I'd like to thank you, Steve, for taking time out of your busy schedule to educate me and the audience worldwide about the true story of Pablo Escobar. I gladly appreciate it.
I'm honored to be on here. This is the podcasts are relatively new to us, but we checked you out and seen that you interviewed quite a few well-known people, and we're just honored to be included with that number.
Well, I appreciate you and everything that you do, Steve. To everyone that is listening, I highly recommend go and get your pen and your pad right now. My great friend Steve Murphy is going to break down layman's terms about the true story of Pablo Escobar, and we're going to talk about Steve Murphy's story along with his partner, Javier Pena, about the movie Narcoterrorist. Is that correct, Steve?
Yes, sir. It's the Netflix series Narcos.
Now, what I'd like to know, and can you explain to the audience in layman's terms, who is the phenomenal Steve Murphy, how long you've been in your powerful industry, and what is the true story of what you played in regards to the true story of Pablo Escobar?
Well, it's me as a person. You know, I grew up in Tennessee, in Middle Tennessee, a little town called Murfreesboro. When I was going into high school, my parents moved back to West Virginia, southern West Virginia, where they're from. So we moved to Princeton, West Virginia. Went to high school there, and then I graduated college in southern West Virginia at Bluefield State College, which if you've never heard of that school, you have no idea what I'm talking about, right? So, just, you know, the point being, I'm just a small town kid. never wanted to do anything other than be in law enforcement. I've had a little run-in with the cops when I was about 10 years old, and the policemen back then used a lot of common sense. Instead of taking us off to jail for trying to break into somebody's house in the middle of the night, which happened to belong to one of our friends, they took us home to our parents. Now, that's probably worse than going to jail, if you knew my dad. The penalties were more severe, believe me, than they would have been from a court. But based on that activity, I've got this fascination with law enforcement, and I thought, there's a way you can help people. So I think that's what, led me down the path of going into the criminal justice administration when I was in college. Started as a local police officer in a small town called Bluefield, West Virginia, southern West Virginia there. Did that for 6 years as a patrolman. Then transferred over and got a job as a special agent with the Norfolk and Western Railway Company, which is now Norfolk Southern Corporation. Worked as a railroad detective with them for 5.5 years, but I always had this fascination for narcotics investigations. And when I was a uniformed policeman in Bluefield, I did a couple of small marijuana busts. I think the biggest one I ever had was a pound. The most cocaine I'd ever seen back during that time was 2 ounces of powder. So as I was working as a railroad policeman, one of the other cops was a former Virginia State Trooper, a guy named Pete Ramey, one of my best friends, and he used to work undercover with the DEA task force out of Roanoke, Virginia. Now, he would tell me his stories, and man, it was for me, it was like watching a drama on television. It just really excited me. Long story short, again, I applied for DEA. It took me 2 years to get the job, but I finally got hired as a special agent in 1987. First post was Miami, Florida. Spent 4 years there. This is the heyday when cocaine was king in South Florida. This is when the kings of cocaine were the guy Rodriguez Gotcha, Pablo Escobar, the Ochoa brothers, Carlos Lader, all those guys. They were mythical proportions. Pablo introduced a business plan and a level of marketing in which he was responsible eventually for 80% of the cocaine coming into the United States. But then he expanded worldwide. He was the king of cocaine around the world.
Wow.
I mean, this guy, he was just out of control. He was unbelievable. And you can just imagine the millions and millions and billions of dollars that were generated from that massive amount of cocaine. So while I'm in Miami, all the cases, and I can tell you one quick story. I already told you that the most cocaine I'd ever seen before was 2 ounces of powder. The first case I got to work on in Miami undercover, we went to the Turks and Caicos Islands. We took $1 million undercover boat down there, picked up 400 kilograms of cocaine.
Wow.
So I went from 2 ounces to 880 pounds. I was like a kid in the candy store. I knew right then, you know what? Good Lord has put me in an occupation where I'm supposed to be, and I stayed there for the next 26 years.
Now, Pablo Escobar, from my research, he basically and his organization smuggled 15 tons of cocaine a day. That's around 30,000 pounds a day. Is that correct?
That sounds right. I think it's actually more than that, to be honest with you.
Wow. Now, I know that you and your partner, Javier Pena, y'all basically were responsible for, taking down his organization. When you and Javier Pena went over to Colombia, how did y'all develop a relationship with Pablo Escobar, and how did y'all develop a relationship with his associates?
Well, that's a really good question, Arthur. I got to Colombia in June 1991, but now Javier got there in 1988. He'd been an agent. He was a local police officer in Laredo, Texas, and a county sheriff down there. Joined DEA, I believe, in 1985. So in 1988, he transferred from Austin, Texas to Colombia. If he were on the phone, he would tell you he'd never heard of Pablo Escobar, had no idea who the guy was, even though he was the biggest drug kingpin. That wasn't the threat that they were facing in Austin, Texas at the time, So he got down there and was assigned a senior partner, and his senior partner was investigating Pablo Escobar and the Medellin cartel, and Javier had to learn all about the guy. Now, at that time, Javier was able to introduce, I guess you'd call it investigative techniques whereby he went out and actively started working with the Colombian National Police. You know, of course, you're a foreigner coming into their organization, and there were some introductions made, but, you know, he had to earn their respect and trust so that they were willing to work with him. And he was able to do that. He's a phenomenal investigator. So he was there for a full 3 years before I showed up in 1991.
Wow.
By that time, Javier had earned their respect and trust. I mean, these guys loved the fact that he'd come out and work with them. You know, he'd go eat with them. He'd go have a drink with them at nighttime, got to know some of their families. And in Colombian society, if they introduce you to their families, that's a big honor. So here I show up. You know, I'm showing up in 1991. I knew who Escobar was from all the cases I'd worked in Miami, but honestly, I had no inclination that's what I was going to be assigned to work on. I never dreamt, you know, that I would be one of the case agents assigned to work Pablo Escobar and the Medellin cartel. So
is the food good over in Colombia?
Oh, it's outstanding.
It's better over here in the U.S.
And you know what? I'm glad you said that, because let me just tell you right up front here. Colombians are some of the nicest people you will ever meet in your life. I'm not kidding you. You know, the only Colombians I'd ever met before I went down there were the people that I'd locked up, that I'd put in jail in the United States. And, you know, it's terrible to stereotype anybody, but that's what I did. I just thought, well, man, I mean, every Colombian's got to be a drug trafficker. And it was so far from the truth. I mean, these are very proud people. If you go down with an open attitude and you accept their culture and you want to participate in their culture and speak their language and try to get along, I've never met a more accepting people. But now they are very proud. So if you go down there with an attitude, they'll tell you real quick how to get off that bus and where you can get off, you know. But so it's a beautiful country. I mean, you know, they got the flower market, they've got the emeralds, they got the gold mines, they've got petroleum, they got the coffee fields, beautiful beaches, you got the Andes Mountains. It's just a beautiful place. So if your listeners don't remember anything else I say today, I would ask that you please don't think of Colombia as a bad place. We highly encourage people to go there and visit. It's safer now than it used to be. They still have cocaine problems. They still have the FARC guerrillas. They have those issues. But your big cities are safe. I mean, I encourage my kids and my daughter-in-law and her friends to go visit Cartagena, beautiful beaches there. Just go experience it for yourself. It's such a beautiful place, and the people are so nice there.
Wow. Now, I was doing my own research, and according to Google, basically when Pablo Escobar was at the height of his career, they basically offered to pay off the national debt of Colombia for $10 billion. And basically, Pablo Escobar was actually going to be involved in that. Can you expand on that?
Well, that is a great indicator of just how much money was involved in that business.
Wow.
Just how huge they were. I mean, when you say the king of cocaine, there's a book out called The King's Cocaine that talks about those guys, about the Medellin cartel, and it's true. I mean, there was that much money. Pablo was rated by Forbes magazine. Now, this is an internationally recognized financial magazine. This is not the United States government making up statistics, you know. Forbes magazine rated Pablo as the 7th richest person in the world, in the entire world. And this is comparing him to the oil sheiks over in the Middle East. I mean, the ultra rich people of the world. And it wasn't just
richer than Warren Buffett.
Exactly. So, and it wasn't just 1 year. This is several years running. I think it was 7 years running. I might be wrong on that, but it's a number of years running.
Now, when you are building that type of stature as being one of the biggest drug traffickers in the world, now, did Pablo develop a relationship with the Colombian government, and who did Pablo wanted to, emulate? Was it somebody in Colombia that he looked up to as being real strong as a drug trafficker?
Well, as far as who he looked up to, I'm not aware of anybody. He grew up very poor, but he used to brag that, by the time he reached a certain age, if he didn't have $1 million, he was going to kill himself, or something stupid like that.
Wow.
And that's according to a book I read that I'm not sure is true. But he did not have a conscience. He didn't have any guilt feelings. He had no remorse. I mean, he's a psychopathic type of person that felt no feelings whatsoever of enforcing violence against people, including murder and torture, to reach his goal, which was to build up Pablo Escobar. This guy's ego was out of control. We know he ran for an alternate congressman in Colombia and was elected. As soon as the election was over, the primary congressman for that area resigned his position for health reasons, is what he claimed. He wanted to spend more time with his family, which put Pablo in the primary role. Now, as a congressman in Colombia, you cannot be arrested. But if you've ever been arrested before, you cannot run for Congress down there. Well, Pablo thought that all of his criminal records had been destroyed. So when he shows up in Congress, of course, the justice minister at that time was a gentleman named Rodrigo Lara Bonilla. Lara Bonilla was a very brave man because he called Pablo Escobar out in open Congress and called him what he was. He exposed a mugshot where he had been arrested. He told everybody, this is nothing more than a drug dealer. This is a murderer. This is a liar. So Escobar was banned from Congress. He had to resign his position. Unfortunately, within just a few days, Rodrigo Lara Bonilla was assassinated. As he was driving in his car, two men on a motorcycle drove up beside him, and the man on the back had a machine gun and killed him right there in the back of his car.
Wow. So they put out a hit on him.
That's Pablo Escobar, a man who will kill, it doesn't matter who, to get to his own means, to get to the end, to reach his goals. He was that violent.
Now, was Pablo embarrassed by that mugshot?
He was, because he thought, if you remember back in the history of Colombia, there was a military group, insurgency group called M19. They attacked the Palace of Justice in Colombia, and this was, I'm going to say, in the early to mid-'80s. And so they went in and they took a bunch of judges hostage. They took a lot of employees hostage. And the Colombian government responded by sending the Colombian military in to take the building back. And if you've ever seen that news footage, they used tanks to blow holes in the walls of the Palace of Justice. There were fires set in there. A number of judges were killed. A number of people were killed during that assault. Some Colombian military enlisted guys were killed during the firefights. The whole goal of that mission, though, was Pablo Escobar paid them to go in and destroy all criminal evidence against him. Now, he thought that had been done during that. I mean, this is a big part of their history down there that this happened. He thought all the evidence had been destroyed, but he was wrong. Not all of it had been destroyed, and that's when Lara Bonilla revealed that mugshot of Pablo Escobar. Pablo was extremely embarrassed, and that's when he declared war the first time against his own government.
Wow. So basically at that time in the 1980s and early 90s, Pablo Escobar was basically above the law because he was creating his own rules.
Well, he thought he was above the law. And I mean, he wanted to be president of Colombia. He thought people loved him that much. This guy, I'm not sure that he ever finished high school. I don't know that he had any kind of formal education. He had no real business experience other than the cocaine trade. People say, well, if he had applied himself in a legitimate business, he could have been a millionaire that way. Well, I don't agree with that either. Neither does Javier, because his business model was he would tell you to do something. If you didn't do it, he just killed you. Well, you can't do that in a legitimate business, right?
That's true.
So that's how he got his way.
Wow. So he was just a ruthless drug trafficker. So basically, if you mess with his emotions, he would just assassinate you or get his team to assassinate you immediately if he felt as though that you was a threat.
He did. And I mean, we've got great examples of that. He killed the leading presidential candidate of Colombia, Luis Carlos Galan, had him assassinated because Galan was running on a platform of pro-extradition, of extraditing Colombian drug traffickers to the United States. And Pablo was anti-extradition. That was one of his main platforms. We saw where Pablo had a bomb put on a commercial airliner flight that was carrying 110 innocent people from Bogota to Cali, Colombia. I mean, people just getting on the plane, going to visit family, going up on business trips, maybe returning home from the vacation.
Wow.
Killed 110 innocent people because Pablo thought Luis Carlos Galan was going to be on that flight. I'm sorry, this was after Galan was killed. The next leading candidate was Cesar Gaviria, who was eventually elected president of Colombia.
Mm-hmm.
He thought Gaviria was going to be on that flight. So he killed 110 innocent people. It's like an American or a U.S. Air or United Airlines flight here in the United States. It's just unheard of. We being Javier and I, we attribute 10 to 15,000 murders that Pablo was responsible for. But now there's one surviving member of his organization, a guy who goes by the nickname of Popeye, who lives in Colombia. He's been on social media. I think he even had a Netflix show. He's written a book.
Mm-hmm.
Popeye said the number is more like 50,000 people that Pablo is responsible for murdering. 50,000 people.
Wow. Wow, that is a lot of casualties.
It's you know what? If you go back and look at the Vietnam War that the United States fought in, we had I think it was a little over 58,000 American soldiers killed during Vietnam. We thought that was horrible, and it was horrible. But here's one man who's just running a drug trafficking organization responsible for more than 50,000, almost the number of military personnel we lost during those years and years in the Vietnam War.
From your perspective, Steve, how do you think that Pablo Escobar had so much of a strong influence on people in Colombia to get behind him? Do you think it was the lifestyles that people were fascinated with and the money was coming in so fast where people was like, you know what, I want to be connected to his energy?
Well, there's a variety of things there. So you're right, the money did have a lot to do with it. You know, people look at that lifestyle that, you know, here's a man without a business background, without a formal education, and look at his wealth. I mean, he really liked to show off his wealth. But now there's this myth in Colombia that Pablo was some kind of Robin Hood, he had this Robin Hood persona, and that really bothers Javier and I when we hear that because it's not true. Now, what Pablo did do is he did go into the poorest barrio of Medellin, Colombia. That's where he's from. These people were literally living on the edge of a trash dump. They had no housing. They had no food. Their food came from a trash dump. Their clothing came from a trash dump. The pieces of cardboard and wood that they put together to try to create these shacks came from a trash dump. Now, Pablo did go in and he built housing and gave it to them for free. That's true. He went in and built clinics. He built soccer fields. He gave away money. He gave away food. That's all true. He did it in that one barrio. And, of course, all those things are good because it really does look like he's trying to help the poor people of Medellin. But now Pablo had an army of as many as 500 sicarios. Sicario is a Spanish word for assassin. So he had as many as 500 assassins working for him, protecting him. During the gun battles with the Colombian police and the Colombian military and the other cocaine organizations out there, his rivals, these sicarios are being killed. So where do you think he went when he needed new sicarios? He went right back to that barrio where he built all that free housing because those people thought this man walked on water. They looked at him as some kind of god, and if you think about it, if you've never had a roof over your head and you've never had food and all of a sudden you do, and this man's responsible for it, well, it kind of helps you understand why they looked at him like that. And so Pablo would go in there and he'd say, he'd hug them, he'd kiss them, he'd say, my friends, I need 100 people who are willing to come and work for Pablo Escobar, who will kill for me, who will die for me. And the sad thing is he might have 400 volunteers step up. So when people say he's a Robin, there's nothing further from the truth. What he was, and he was a master manipulator. He went back in and manipulated these people so that they were willing to give their life for him. Just, so there's nothing magnanimous about this man whatsoever. He's a mass murderer who took advantage of everybody else to reach his own means and his own goals.
You are experiencing a life-changing, powerful interview, and you are hearing it first from Arthur Robinson Jr.'s PowerfulInterviews.com.
So when Pablo Escobar basically let you into his organization, he developed a culture and basically told his associates, like, blood in, blood out?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. If you worked for him, the only way out was you sacrificed your life.
Wow. Now, did Pablo Escobar, did he do a lot of drug trafficking over here in the United States?
Absolutely. He set up his first routes through Miami because that's the closest port of entry to South America. He sent a lady up named Griselda Blanco. A lot of people have heard of her. There's been movies and documentaries done on her. Her nickname was the Black Widow because I think every husband she had was murdered or ended up dead.
Wow.
So that's how she got the name Black Widow. She committed quite a few murders in South Florida. I think she was convicted of something like 20 murders. She went to prison. Was it 20 or I can't remember the number of numbers, but she did about 20 years in prison here in the United States. Then she turned around and, as soon as she was released, she was deported back to Colombia. And you know what? Traffickers have a very long memory. So those families that were affected by all the people that she murdered, they remembered that. She lasted 2 weeks on the streets of Medellin after she returned to Colombia. She was coming out of a shop one day, and two guys on a motorcycle drove up and assassinated her right there on the sidewalk in front of that shop.
Wow.
So, I mean, this level of violence just went everywhere.
Now, do you think Pablo was responsible for that, or basically they were actually cool in terms of their relationship?
I'm not sure, to be quite honest. I don't want to tell you something that's not true here. I don't know that if there was a rift between Griselda and Pablo, but the families of the people that she murdered in the United States, they got their revenge against her.
Wow. Yes, you had to be careful of, what you do, and karma is really, really strong. And, I always say, treat people the way you like to be treated, because when you put out that toxic energy out into the universe, it will be reciprocated back on you, or it can come within your own family where something can happen to their health or something can happen to their lives.
Exactly.
Steve, can you explain to the audience in layman's terms, what is the best advice that you have ever received as a DNA agent?
Well, you know what? And I sound like I'm on a soapbox when I say this, and that's not my intent. I'm just answering your question here, but I truly believe this. There are a lot of things in our lives that we think we have control over, but we actually don't. I mean, it could be something as simple as you come home from work today, Arthur, and you think, well, you know what? Tonight I'm going to take the kids and we're going to do this. But then your kids come in from school and they say, hey, Dad, I've got a project due tomorrow and I forgot about it. And now you're spending the whole evening doing their homework or helping them create this project. Or there's just a variety. You're on your way to church and you're involved in an accident. There's just so many little variables in our lives that we really can't control, but those control our lives.
That's true.
So there's so many areas that we just don't have control over, but there is absolutely one area in every person's life that we do control, and that's your personal integrity. That's something that if you ever give up, you don't get it back. It's a choice you make. So by that, I'm saying if as a individual, if you decide to lie to somebody, well, you just lost your integrity. If you decide to become involved in a crime, you just lost your integrity. Integrity is doing the right thing when nobody's watching, right? Mm-hmm. So that's probably the best advice I got along the way as a young police officer was guard your integrity. And I challenge everybody to do that now, because we have to set the examples. We as adults have to set the examples for the young people as they're growing up, right?
That's true. Our young millennials and our young children, they are future benefactors.
And it sounds corny and it sounds cliche, but our young people are our future leaders. That's the absolute truth. Whether you like that saying or not, that's the absolute truth. So we hear so many bad things about our young people. And so Javier and I, we take the time out, and we'll go speak to high schools and where we live. I live in the Washington, D.C. area. Javier lives in San Antonio, Texas. And we'll go out, and of course, we don't charge these people. We have a speaking business, and it's just the right thing to do to go speak to these, young adults. And the reason I like doing it is I'm so encouraged when I leave there, because all I hear is the bad things about these kids. They're lazy. They expect everything handed to them. They're not going to be able to carry on our country. Well, maybe that's true to a degree, but the high schoolers that I've met in Southern Maryland and here in Northern Virginia and the D.C. area, I come away so encouraged because I see that these people, they want to learn, they want to step up, and they want to do the right thing. So I always talk to them about integrity, and I hope they listen to me. I can't make them listen to me, but again, that's one message I hope they get from me.
Wow. Steve, when you were a DNA agent over in Colombia, what type of firearms were Pablo Escobar and his organization using to basically assassinate, innocent people?
Well, the firearms just ran the gamut. I mean, it was everything from revolvers to semi-automatic pistols. The Beretta SF-92s were very popular back during that time. They had shotguns. They had fully automatic machine guns. They had the Uzis. They had the MAC-10s.
Did they have AR-15s?
Had AR-15s. They had AK-47s from Russia.
M12s?
They had that. They had the M14 rifles. They had RPGs, the rocket-propelled grenade launchers. They had hand grenades. But one of Pablo's favorite ways of killing people was car bombs. And
wow.
This was really scary for us because you never knew. I mean, you drive down a residential street. There's cars on both sides of the street. Does one of them have a bomb? And that was something we had never seen in law enforcement. So that's why we say that Pablo Escobar is the world's first narco-terrorist. What's a narco-terrorist? It's a terrorist. It's a narcotics trafficker that employs terroristic activities in his daily dealings, his business dealings. So Pablo introduced car bombs to the narcotics trafficking business. There were times when there would be truckloads of police officers riding along in the back of the truck. Might be 30 cops in there. A car bomb goes off, kills 30 police officers. There was a time when my wife and I were living in Bogota. There was a mall down on 15th Street in northern Bogota. The mall was the size of a city block, so that's pretty large. The whole front of it was glass. Pablo set off a car bomb out in front of that mall, and you can imagine what that did to the glass. Now you've got all these shards of glass that are just flying projectiles, killing whatever gets in their way. It just so happened that when that bomb went off, there were mothers there with their school-age children buying school supplies. So you can imagine the carnage that this created. You see those iconic photos of policemen and firemen carrying the lifeless bodies of children, 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds. That's what Pablo Escobar did that day. We went down there. You see the pieces of concrete and glass laying everywhere. And then you see the smoke still building from the fires. And then you walk up and you see bodies. And then you start seeing body parts. I mean, it's so graphic. It's things that, you can't cleanse from your memory. It stays with you the rest of your life. That's the guy we're talking about here.
So at that time, basically Pablo Escobar was untouchable.
Well, he thought so, and to a certain degree he was. You'd asked me earlier about corruption in the government, and I failed to answer that. There was some corruption. It was, believe it or not, in the Colombian National Police, the corruption was very minor. In the Colombian military, we saw that it was a little more prevalent. Pablo did go pay off congressmen. He paid off judges. He paid off prosecutors. But I don't want that to be an indictment of the entire government of Colombia. It wasn't everybody. There were some stand-up people there. And if you think about it, Pablo employed this theory of what he called plata or plomo. And those are Spanish words for silver or lead. Do you want silver in the form of money, or do you want lead in the form of a bullet? So as an example, Pablo might go in, he'd send his henchmen in to meet with the judges. And he'd say, we're here as representatives of Pablo Escobar. Pablo would like you to dismiss these charges against him. Well, the first judge that saw that, he's like, I'm not going to do that. And they're like, whoa, wait a minute. If you'll dismiss the charges, here's a briefcase containing $50,000 that Mr. Escobar would like for you to have. All you have to do is dismiss the case. Well, those judges, being honest men, they ran these guys out of their office. Well, the next day, they killed the judge's wife. They killed his children. They killed his parents, and then they killed him. So now word gets out, right? They killed the whole
family tree.
They did. And so you can imagine how strong that message is, so that the next time they went to the next judge, well, that guy might take the payoff.
You're right.
Now, I cannot condone that as a retired law enforcement officer, but I can understand why people would be inclined to go that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and I'm the last person. I'm not going to judge those people for the decision they made because they were trying to protect their families.
Yeah, yes, exactly. And actually, their lives are in jeopardy.
Absolutely. And not just their lives. They would bring in pictures of the guy's children coming out of their elementary school, or maybe the wife walking out of the front door of their house, or his parents coming out of the local church. I mean, Pablo knew how to play these people.
Wow, this is an incredible interview, and I appreciate you coming on my show today, Steve.
Thank you, Arthur. Thank you.
Steve, from your own analysis, what kind of personality you think Pablo Escobar had? I mean, was he, funny? Did he have a nice personality, nice sense of humor? Or, was he like, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, where he was happy one minute, but if you rubbed him the wrong way, then that ruthless mentality would come out of him?
I think that's a very, very good comparison right there. Like I said earlier, his ego controlled him. It was all about him. It's what makes Pablo great.
So he had a big ego.
Oh, it was unbelievable. It wouldn't fit in a city auditorium. It was all about him. He did have a compassionate side, I guess you could say, as an example, where he went and built the housing for the people living at the trash dump. But it didn't come free. It came with a cost attached to it, and that was people giving their lives for him down the road. He was known to use marijuana almost every day, so he's smoking weed just about every day of his life.
Wow.
We did not know him to use cocaine. I'm sure he tried it, but that's just my personal opinion. But, we know from people who were with him on a regular basis that he smoked marijuana almost every day of his life. He did drink alcohol. He was married, but he did have a lot of parties with other women. He was known to have multiple girlfriends. But it's all about Pablo. He spent some of his money on his famous ranch, Fincanapolese. This is a 1,000-acre. I've heard everything from 1,000 to 10,000 acres. And he imported all these exotic animals. He had rhinoceros, he had hippos, he had elephants, zebras, peacocks, monkeys. I mean, he had all these exotic animals there. And
now, did you visit his house at this time?
Well, this was after he was on the run. The government of Colombia seized the house, and they actually converted it over into a police base. So a lot of times when we were out on the helicopters doing operations, if we were out on mountain patrols for the day, or maybe if we'd raided several ranches in that area, we would land at the base, and they had they could refuel the helicopters and so forth. But the place was just out of control. It was magnificent. It was just beautiful.
Wow. Now, from what I hear, did he actually was basically having a conversation with his wife, and at the same time in that room where he was actually torturing someone else while having a conversation with his wife?
Absolutely true. In fact, my partner Javier Pena heard that conversation. So the Colombian National Police were, they were listening to his telephones. And the telephone systems back then were not like we have today. Basically, they were radio telephones. They would operate off of radio frequencies. Mm-hmm. And so when they could identify the frequencies, they would listen into his conversations. And he's having a conversation with his wife about, oh, I miss you, honey. Yeah, I can bring home milk and bread tonight, or, just an innocuous conversation that any of us would have with our wife. But in the background, you could hear a man screaming. And so his wife's asking, what is that noise? And he said, hold on just a second, honey. And he tries to cover up the phone, but you could hear him say, cover his mouth. And, I can just imagine he's probably pulling his finger across his throat like, shut that guy up. And the next thing you know, you hear dead silence. And he comes back on the phone. Well, I'll be home soon. Everything will be okay. They killed the guy.
Wow.
That's absolutely true.
Now, from your perspective, Steve, the level that Pablo Escobar was on, do you think that you have to be ruthless in regards to making money and having a major impact wherever that you are residing at?
Yeah, in that industry, yes. In that career path of drug trafficking, you have to be ruthless because your competitors are trying to take you out. Pablo was running the Medellin cartel, but his biggest rival was the Cali cartel. So there were open battles. The Rodriguez Oruela brothers that ran the Cali cartel, they had a string of legitimate businesses, a string of pharmacies and drugstores throughout Colombia. So Pablo was known to park a car bomb in front of their drugstores, and they had hundreds of them around the country. He'd park a car bomb in front of them and blow the store up.
Wow.
And those car bombs, that's when you're killing innocent people because it's on a timer. So when the timer runs out and it explodes, whoever just happens to be in the wrong place at the wrong time is no longer with us.
Now let's talk about these car bombs. That is a very scary situation where, you could be coming out of the mall, you could be coming out of your house, you could be coming out of a business meeting at a facility and get into your car, and 9 times out of 10 you won't make it home because you're blowing up because of someone basically set you up with a car bomb. Now, have you seen the movie Scarface with Al Pacino?
Yes, sir.
Okay, now you remember the ruthless drug lord Sosa that was in that movie?
Right.
And remember when him and Al Pacino and his partner at the time, but when they looked him up, they found out he was a informant for the police, and basically they, took Al Pacino's partner in a helicopter and they killed him right on his turf on Sosa's land. And he basically had a hitman, and he had a car bomber. Remember where they was getting heat, they wanted to basically eliminate the gentleman that was exposing them on national television about, these were big drug traffickers in the world, and Sosa didn't like that, but he needed help, and he basically told Al Pacino to go with his bomb man. And they put the bomb under the car, but, unfortunately, Al Pacino, he had a heart, and he did not want to kill the man's wife or the kids. So basically that brought down two evils. That brought down Al Pacino, that brought down Sosa. Do you think that Pablo Escobar, he had a bomb person that was by his side, as also he had a hitman, ruthless killer that was by his side? So if anything went down, he just told them to do exactly what he wanted them to do?
Absolutely. So as somebody by his side that would go kill people, the lone remaining surviving member of the Medellin cartel is this guy Popeye. His real name is John Jairo Vasquez Velasquez. He's living in Medellin, Colombia. He's a free man. He did his time in prison down there. Popeye admitted on a documentary that we're on that he killed as many as 300 people himself, and that he arranged the murders of as many as 3,000 people, all under the orders of Pablo Escobar.
Wow.
So if you go back and look when Pablo surrendered to his custom-built prison, Popeye was one of the inmates that was there in the prison with him. Now, as far as the car bombs, Pablo brought in experts from the Middle East. So he brought in mercenaries from Israel to teach his guys how to fight like mercenaries, how to shoot and move and all the different tactics involved in a gunfight. And he also brought in professional bomb makers from the Middle East to teach his guys how to produce car bombs. One of the most well-known car bombs that Pablo set off, the head of there was an organization down in Colombia called DAS, D-A-S. It's no longer in existence.
DAS.
And it's DAS, D-A-S. So it's kind of comparable to our FBI, but also maybe our secret police, if we had a secret intelligence agency. Mm-hmm. The head of that was General Maza Marquez, who was a pro-American. We consider him a very close ally. Pablo hated the man, tried to kill him 7 times. So one day Pablo takes a bus. They create this massive car bomb with 500 kilos of TNT. They park the bus in front of DAS headquarters. The drivers run away. They detonate the bomb, killed well over 100 people, wounded thousands of people from this massive car bomb. The crater looked like something from World War II that was created in the street where this massive, massive bomb went off. Wow. They found the frame of the bus on top of a high-rise. That's how powerful this bomb was. Maza was in DAS headquarters and walked away unscathed that day.
You are experiencing a life-changing, powerful interview, and you are hearing it first from Arthur Robinson Jr.'s PowerfulInterviews.com.
Now, explain to the audience what exactly is TNT.
Oh, just dynamite, basically dynamite. And they would mix it with ammonium nitrate, which increases the explosive power of an explosive. So, just a massive, massive bomb.
Wow. Do you think that Pablo Escobar was influenced by him growing up poor, and he just developed a strong mindset and developed a strong work ethic where he said, well, you know what, this is the path I want to go on in regards to building my own wealth as being the biggest drug trafficker in the world?
I do. I think that growing up poor had an effect on him, as to what he wanted to do as he grew up. But I also think he saw other petty criminals, and he thought that was an easy way to make money. So he started off by still considered a large trafficker because he was doing 15, 20 kilos at a time. But Pablo saw that how quickly the guy made some money off that because the drugs moved so quickly. And Pablo went and killed Restrepo and then took over his business. That's how he got started in the drug business. So he just, at a very early age, had no compunction whatsoever killing people, and it just grew and grew and grew from there.
So his mentality that he developed over a period of time, if he wants something and you told him no, he would just assassinate you and just take it.
Right. And wouldn't give you a second chance. If you told him no, it's just kill him, and then he took what he wanted.
Wow. Now, from what I'm hearing, I heard that he basically owned 800 beautiful homes and villas in Colombia.
Yes.
And he also had, 20 lakes on one of his residences in Colombia. Now, did he throw a lot of, high-end parties at his homes?
Well, let me tell you. So when I have a cookout in my backyard, and it's probably similar to what you do, we have our family, friends, and neighbors come over, and we might be be there for 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 hours on a good evening.
Right.
And you bring in your family, friends, neighbors, and you have some good barbecue foods, good cold drinks, and good fellowship between everybody. Well, when Pablo threw a party, his parties lasted 3 to 5 days.
Wow.
A 5-day party.
They love the party.
Oh, big time. And, we had informants that would work these parties, and they come out and tell you, they say, everybody, on every table there's a kilo of cocaine. So if you want to smoke coke, there it is. There's pounds and pounds of marijuana available. There's bottles of alcohol everywhere. There's a drink that's kind of like the national drink of Colombia. It's called aguardiente. It tastes, quite honestly, it tastes like ouzo if you've ever tried that. Aguardiente translates into firewater. It's pretty strong stuff. So there would be that there. They would bring in hookers. They would bring in mariachi bands. They would have famous bands. They'd have sports stars. They'd have beauty queens. I mean, it was just debauchery blown out of control. So it was all about just having a good time too. You weren't there to do business. He had an airstrip on his ranch, so all his little drug buddies, they could fly their private planes in there for the parties, and it was just food galore. It was just having a good time with whoever friends he wanted to bring in at that time.
Now, at that time, was he actually partying with his wife and family, or did he have like private parties?
Now, these would be private parties. So he'd send his wife and children off. He had a son and a daughter. He'd send them out, and that way, that's why they'd bring the hookers and the prostitutes. But now he also had family parties, because we've seen a lot of videos and photographs of those. And people, like to say, this is another misconception about Escobar that I have a real problem with. People say, well, Pablo was a devoted family man, that, he was worried about his family's safety. Well, he was worried about his family's safety, but there's nothing farther from the truth of him being a devoted family man. If you're familiar with the deal he struck for himself, where he surrendered to the government of Colombia, he was allowed to come in and plead guilty to one crime of his choosing. He got to pick the crime. And in exchange, he was absolved of every other crime he ever committed in his life, including all these thousands of murders. So he does that. He negotiates this deal, and they say, well, great, you picked the crime. He's like, wait a minute, I got some conditions. He said the first condition is, I'm going to build my own prison, and I'm going to pay for it, because I don't want the taxpayers of Colombia to have to bear that burden. And the government said, okay. He said, well, wait a minute, now I got another condition. All my fellow prisoners, I'm handpicking them and bringing them in. And the guards, I'm going to pay them. And the government of Colombia said, okay. And then his next condition was the good guys, the Colombian police, the Colombian judicial system, the Colombian military, and those gringos, they're not allowed to come within 2 miles of my prison. And the government said, okay. And then here's a man who's a multi-billionaire. There were no stipulations whatsoever to take any of his assets. He gets to keep all his stuff. And you know how long his prison term was?
How long?
5 years. 5 years.
Now, he did prison time, but when he actually did prison time, his where he was actually, doing his time, it was basically immaculate.
Well, he was in this, what he called a prison, you and I would call a country club. Because he's supposed to be there for 5 years. He does 1 year.
Wow.
Now, this is when he lets his ego get control of him again. And he's, what he's doing is he's rebuilding his power base while he's in prison. He's still running cocaine loads. He's charging the other drug traffickers a drug tax on any loads that they move, because he's saying, hey, I put myself out front. I'm taking all this negative heat. I'm in the press. Everybody thinks I'm a murderer. Everybody thinks I'm a drug trafficker, which he actually was. Everybody thinks I'm a terrorist. So in exchange for me fronting myself out like that, you guys are going to pay me a tax. You're either going to pay me $400,000 for every cocaine load you do, or you give me half the load. I get the proceeds from half the load. So he's rebuilding his finances. He's rebuilding his power base. But when it comes towards the end of the year, he gets upset because two of his fellow traffickers, it's the Moncada and Galliano brothers, are accused of not paying up to Pablo. There was some money that was found in a cave that had been hidden. We've heard everything from $10 million to $23 million. I mean, it's a lot of money, whatever it was. This money's in this cave just rotting away. So Pablo gets mad about that. He talks to these two guys in his prison, brings them up to the prison, talks to them, and becomes so incensed. He personally kills Kiko Moncada, one of his childhood friends, one of his lieutenants in his organization. The other prisoners kill Fernando Galliano, the other brother that's there. This ultimately leads to his escape from his prison. So, and that's when the second manhunt started. But I want to get back to the point of him being this devoted family man. He had the deal, we call this the deal of a lifetime. He negotiated the deal of a lifetime with his own government, where he only had to spend 5 years in prison, which we found out was a country club. easy living for anybody for 5 years. After that, he's a free man in Colombia. He can come out. He can go wherever he wants in Colombia. He's got more money than most people in the world. He can watch his children grow up, get married. He can see his grandchildren. To me, that's a devoted family man. You put your family first. Mm-hmm. But we know now from history that's not what Pablo did. He put himself first. He let his ego get control of him so that he couldn't even go visit his family. So that's just another myth that I try to dispel at every opportunity. Javier and I just absolutely do not agree with that.
Now, when he did prison time, did he have his wife or did he have, other beautiful women coming to visit him while he was doing prison time?
On a regular basis.
Wow.
I mean, this sounds so ridiculous. I know most people, I don't know if I hope they believe it because it is the truth. That's the one thing that Javier and I do is we tell the truth about this. We don't embellish anything. Mm-hmm. But, he was known to have, we found photographs and videos of some of the orgies they were throwing up there. They were bringing in beauty queens. When he wanted to play soccer, he would invite the national soccer team of Colombia, and they came up to play him. If he wanted to go out to a restaurant or a bar or go watch a soccer match or go visit his family, he left the prison whenever he wanted to. I mean, it was just like a revolving door on the front of this prison. It's just a big joke.
Wow. So he basically was given terms to the Colombian government on what he was going to do and how he was going to spend his time in prison.
Exactly. But now, I've got to say this because I really don't. I don't intend to say bad things about the government of Colombia. I mean, they were between that rock and the hard place. Mm-hmm. When Pablo initially went to prison, you know what? The bombs stopped. The indiscriminate bombings and the drive-by shootings, all of that did stop. It's just that it didn't last very long. So the world was looking at President Cesar Gaviria, who agreed to this deal. And the Attorney General back then was a guy named Gustavo de Grief. He's the guy that actually negotiated this entire deal with Pablo Escobar. And the world is saying, no, this is such a joke. You can't give in to terrorists this way. You can't give in to criminals this way. Well, then all of a sudden the bombing stops and the murdering stops. And you think, and everybody steps back and thinking, wow, maybe they're onto something here. But, again, it lasted less than a year. Pablo got right back into his old ways, escaped from his prison, and that led into the 18-month manhunt, which, ultimately led to his death in December 1993.
Now, I know that Pablo basically, traveled all over the world. Do you think that the heat that he brought on himself along with his organization, do you think that he just could have relocated his family and been just as effective, let's just say if he moved to Hawaii, as well as he was actually doing when he was actually in Colombia? Do you think he still could have been a strong drug trafficker if he relocated and moved to Hawaii just to get away from the heat that he was actually, brewing up in Colombia?
Well, he knew that if he left Colombia, he would be extradited to the United States.
Oh.
So the United States has extradition reciprocal agreements with most countries around the world. And that was his whole platform, was anti-extradition. He did not want to go to prison in the United States, which is a testament, I think, to our prison system because he knew it would be a real prison. It wouldn't be the country club he had in Colombia. Now, he did go, if you go back and do a little bit more research, you'll see that he went to Panama back when Manuel Noriega was the dictator in charge of Panama back then. Mm-hmm. And they paid off Noriega, and they were allowed to hide out in Panama for a while. But Panama actually has borders with Colombia, so he didn't go far. And eventually he had to go back to Colombia because even Panama wasn't safe for him.
Wow. Now, from your thought process, did you want Pablo Escobar to live